There's a special kind of fear that doesn't come from ghosts or monsters. It's not the kind of fear that claws at you from the dark, but the kind that seeps into your soul. The one that comes from people. The ones who knock when they shouldn't. The ones who wait just outside your door, listening. Welcome to Night Encounters. Tonight's story is a chilling, allegedly true experience shared by Evan, one of our subscribers, who learned the hard way that sometimes opening the door can change everything. This is I Shouldn't Have Answered the Door by Evan Davis. It was early March of 2021, and everything felt off-kilter. The world was stuck in that uncomfortable space between the tail end of winter and the tentative breath of spring. The sky was an unyielding gray, like the heavens themselves were holding their breath. The cold air lingered like a heavy blanket, refusing to leave, but it wasn't the biting chill of winter anymore. It was the damp, oppressive cold of transition, the kind that clung to your skin, making you shiver even when you were inside, and made the days feel far longer than they actually were. I rented a small single-bedroom house on the outskirts of town, the kind of neighborhood where everything felt like it was frozen in time. The houses were old, some of them sagging with age, but there was something comforting about the quiet. The kind of neighborhood where everyone minded their own business, and the nights drifted by without a sound. Most of the time, you could hear nothing more than the occasional car passing by, or the soft rustling of leaves in the wind. It was a place I thought was safe, almost too safe, like a sanctuary from the world's chaos. I had planned to spend a peaceful year there, working remotely for the tech company I was employed with. With my girlfriend now 2 states away for grad school, I was adjusting to the solitude that came with her absence. We'd been together for 2 years, and although we stayed in touch through phone calls and messages, it wasn't the same. The house felt empty without her. I found myself spending long hours alone, the quiet echoing in the corners of my mind as I worked through the days, occasionally distracting myself with documentaries on true crime, the kind of shows that, while unsettling, filled the silence. It was during one of these late-night marathons that something happened that would change everything. The night began like any other. The rain was falling lightly outside, tapping rhythmically against the windows as I sank into the couch, wrapped in a thick blanket, half watching an old episode of a crime documentary. The glow of the TV was the only source of light in the room, casting long shadows across the living room. The clock on the wall showed it was 10:47 p.m. when I heard it. A knock. It was soft at first, almost imperceptible, but the sound reverberated in the silence of the house. 3 quick knocks. Not loud, not urgent, just there. I paused, my fingers frozen on the remote, and glanced at the clock. Who would be knocking at my door at this hour? I sat still for a moment, trying to decide whether I should just ignore it. I didn't recognize the sound of a car engine outside, and I hadn't been expecting any deliveries. But maybe it was just a mistake, a wrong address. Maybe someone needed directions. Then the knock came again. 3 taps. This time, a little harder, a little more insistent. My stomach clenched. Something felt off. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it, but nothing seemed to fit. I stood up, setting the remote down on the coffee table, the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. There was no reason for someone to be at my door. I hesitated, uncertain of what to do. My living room was positioned just right so that I could see the front door from the hallway. I had no peephole, no smart doorbell. just a small side window with frosted glass next to the door. I knew that the porch light would make it hard to see anything clearly, but I still walked cautiously toward the door. My heart beat loudly in my chest as I peered through the frosted glass, hoping for a glimpse of whoever was standing there. At first, I saw nothing. The porch light cast an eerie glow on the steps, but there was no sign of movement. I held my breath, straining to hear any sounds, but there was nothing. No rustling of clothing, no shuffling of feet. Then I saw it. A figure, just standing there, motionless. The dim light revealed a hooded jacket, and that was all I could make out. They were facing the door, their bodies still and silent. My pulse quickened. I called out, trying to keep my voice calm. "Hello? Can I help you?" There was no response, no shift in posture. The figure didn't even move. They simply turned their heads slightly, almost as if they were listening. Then, without a word, they began to walk away, slowly, almost deliberately. The footsteps faded into the night, swallowed by the sound of the rain. I stood there, breathless, still processing what had just happened. It didn't make sense. Maybe it was a prank, or some confused person, but there was something in the stillness that gnawed at my gut. Why didn't they answer when I spoke? Why did they stand there so silently? As I turned to walk back to the couch, trying to convince myself it was nothing, I heard it again. This time, it wasn't at the door. It came from the side of the house. The sound was faint at first, but unmistakable. A rhythmic tapping, soft and deliberate. Tap, tap, tap. My blood ran cold. I froze mid-step. The tapping grew louder, closer, as if someone was gently pressing their fingers against the kitchen window. I grabbed my phone, turning on the flashlight, my heart pounding as I slowly walked toward the kitchen. The house seemed to stretch on forever, the walls closing in around me. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck rise. When I reached the kitchen, the tapping stopped. A silence so thick it almost suffocated me. I stood still, my breath shallow, waiting. The rain continued to patter softly against the windows, but there was something else, something lurking in the quiet. Then, I saw it. A handprint. On the glass. It was smeared with rainwater, distorted, like someone had pressed their palm against the window, leaving an imprint, clear enough to see, but fading with the moisture. The thought of someone standing just outside, so close, made my stomach churn. I stumbled back, a cold sweat breaking out on my skin. My first instinct was to lock the back door, then grab the nearest weapon, a baseball bat I kept in the bedroom. My hands shook as I gripped it, but I couldn't calm myself. The unease had settled deep in my chest. Maybe it was just some kids, I told myself. Maybe it was nothing. But deep down, I knew better. Time seemed to stretch out as I stood there in the dark, clutching the baseball bat, staring at the smeared handprint on the window. The room felt too small, like the walls were closing in around me. The silence was deafening. My breath was shallow and my heart pounded loudly in my chest, every thud echoing in my ears. I almost convinced myself it was nothing. Maybe just some kids playing a prank, I thought. Or maybe it was some bizarre, random event that had no real significance. But then, my phone buzzed. I froze, eyes wide, staring at the screen. The notification was from an unknown number. I had no idea how they had my number. I hadn't shared it with anyone. I'd just moved into this place, and everything had been arranged through an agency. There was no logical reason why anyone should have it. The message was simple, but it hit me like a punch to the gut. Are you gonna open it? I stared at the text, my fingers trembling as I held the phone. The blood drained from my face. How did they know? How could they possibly know what I was thinking? I hadn't even gotten the chance to process the events from earlier, and now this message just dropped into my lap, as if mocking me. I looked around, feeling suddenly exposed. My front door was locked. The windows were all secure. At least, I thought they were. I turned my attention back to the porch camera feed on my phone. A figure appeared in the frame. It was hard to see clearly, the image flickering slightly. It was glitchy, but unmistakable. The silhouette moved slowly, deliberately toward my door. And then, through the night vision feed, I heard it. A voice, low and eerie, whispering through the speaker. "Hey, I think you dropped this." The word sent a chill down my spine. Dropped what? I hadn't left the house all day. I hadn't even gone out to check the mail. The figure bent down, and for the briefest moment, I saw the top of their hood. They set something down on the porch, right in front of my door, before standing up again and moving back into the shadows. My breath caught in my throat. What could they have left? I couldn't take my eyes off the screen as the figure remained there, motionless. For a moment, everything felt suspended in time. I sat there in the dark, my body stiff with fear, still gripping the bat like my life depended on it. Every instinct screamed at me not to open the door, not to make any move. But the curiosity, the terrible, gnawing curiosity, pushed me forward. I could hear my heart beating in my chest, each pulse louder than the last, drowning out everything else. It was as if the world outside my house had become a distant memory, and all that existed now was me, in that room, watching through the camera feed. The figure remained outside, perfectly still. Then came the knock. Once, twice, 3 times. Slow, deliberate, measured. The air in the room seemed to thicken with each knock, the tension so palpable I could almost taste it. Every part of my body screamed at me to stay away, to not make a sound, to wait it out. But I couldn't help it. I couldn't stay silent. I had to know. I lowered the bat and crept closer to the window, crouching down as I peered through the frosted glass, my eyes straining to make out any more details. And that's when I saw it. The figure, still hooded, stepped closer to the porch light. The dim light illuminated their face for a split second. For just a moment, I saw their features, or rather, half of their face. It was pale. The skin was almost sickly white, as though it hadn't seen the sun in years. And there, running from their jawline up toward their ear, was a thin scar, a jagged line, as though something sharp had slashed across their skin. And then, I saw the smile. It was wide, unsettling, too wide. The kind of smile that didn't match the rest of the expression. It wasn't a drunken grin or a friendly gesture. It was deliberate, cold. I felt my blood run cold. A knot of fear tightened in my stomach. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't some prank. Whoever this was, they were here for a reason. And I wasn't sure I wanted to find out what that reason was. I backed away from the window, my pulse racing, and instinctively reached for my phone. My hands were trembling, but I couldn't stop myself. I had to know more. I had to find out who was doing this. The phone screen lit up again. Another message from the unknown number. "I can see you." The words felt like a slap in the face. I looked back at the window, my heart pounding in my chest. My breath was shallow. I couldn't even think clearly anymore. How could they see me? How long had they been watching? My mind raced, but all I could focus on was that horrible, crawling sense of being watched, being hunted. I wanted to scream, to run, to do anything to get away from this feeling. But I couldn't move. I didn't have time to think about what the message meant because, in that moment, I saw it. The figure had disappeared. I quickly rushed to the bathroom, locking the door behind me. My hands were slick with sweat, my entire body tense as I grabbed the phone again, this time dialing 911. The operator picked up almost immediately, her voice calm but laced with concern. 911, what's your emergency? I barely managed to whisper, my voice tight with fear. There's someone outside my house. I think they've been watching me. Please, you have to send help. She assured me that officers were already on their way, but as I sat there, waiting, the minutes stretched on like hours. Every little sound felt amplified, the rain hitting the windows like a drumbeat. The wind rustled outside, and every creak of the house made my heart skip a beat. Then I heard it. A thud. Heavy, like something large had been dropped against the door. I jumped, my heart in my throat, and whispered a desperate plea to the operator. Please hurry. They're getting closer. I could hear the crunch of boots on wet gravel, the sound of officers approaching. It felt like an eternity before the doorbell rang, but when I opened it, the officers were already there, ready to check the property. The porch was empty. The figure was gone. But on the welcome mat, sitting neatly as though placed deliberately, was a small cardboard box. It was damp from the rain, and the edges were curling from the moisture. I felt my stomach lurch as I bent down to open it. Inside was a photograph, a picture of my front door, taken from the inside. It was chilling. The realization that whoever had been outside had been so close, so incredibly close, made me feel sick. How had they gotten the photo? Had they been inside? Had they been watching me the entire time? The officers took the photo, checked for fingerprints, and even inspected the locks and windows. But there was no sign of forced entry, no evidence of anyone actually coming inside, just the photograph. I didn't stay much longer. 2 weeks later, I packed up my things and moved out. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, even after I left. To this day, I don't know who the figure was or how they managed to take that photo. But one thing is certain. Sometimes, when I hear a knock after dark, I just sit there in silence, because I shouldn't have answered the door. As I sit here now, reflecting on that night, the memory still chills me to the bone. Time has passed since I moved out of that house, but the feeling of being watched, of someone just beyond my reach, has never really gone away. I try to shake it off, to tell myself it was just a freak incident, but deep down, I know it wasn't. I know it wasn't random. The feeling of someone waiting for you just outside your door, the silence that stretches on too long, the sense that you're never truly alone, that stays with you. It's a fear that doesn't fade with time. The truth is, I'll never really know who was at my door that night. I'll never understand what they wanted or why they kept coming back. Sometimes I wonder if they're still out there, somewhere, watching, waiting. Maybe they've moved on to someone else, to another lonely soul who thinks they're safe behind closed doors. Maybe they've forgotten about me, but the haunting feeling of that night will always linger in my mind. And that's the thing about fear. It doesn't always come from the things we can see or understand. Sometimes the real terror is in the unknown, in the questions that never get answered. It's in the way something so ordinary, something as simple as a knock on the door, can turn everything upside down. I used to think that the scariest thing in the world was the idea of something out there lurking in the dark. But now, I know the truth. Sometimes, it's not the shadows that you should fear. It's the ones who knock, the ones who wait, the ones who see you and never say a word. And if you're ever in a situation where you're not sure whether to answer the door, just remember this story and ask yourself, do I really want to know what's on the other side? So, if you ever hear a knock late at night, maybe it's best to stay silent. Maybe it's best to just pretend you're not home. Because once that door opens, there's no telling what might walk in. Some stories serve as a reminder that horror doesn't always come from the dark corners of our nightmares. Sometimes, it waits right outside your door. And if you've ever experienced something strange, unsettling, or truly unexplainable, remember, you're not alone. Send us your story at nightencountersstories@gmail.com. We'd love to hear your experience. Trust your instincts, stay safe, and good night.